Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with our nursery roundtable. So we'll start off, I'll have everybody introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their nursery and operation, and then kind of like the last roundtable, we'll have questions and we'll have people with mics to come around and let you ask questions and they can answer them for you. So we'll go ahead and get started with introductions.
Well, here we go again. Roger Ort again. I went over the trees in the grower edition. So for the nursery, we are an edible plant nursery. So besides this stuff I went over with you guys earlier, we do figs, pomegranates, sea berries, any kind of berry, honeyberry, anything you can imagine. Cornelian cherries, which I think Tom talked about. We try to do a lot with those. So yeah, just an edible plant nursery, everything potted, sell out the door and plant sales and events like that.
My name's Charles West. I'm from Central New Jersey. We have a farm called West Farm, very appropriate. I have basically what you might call a retiree's commercial operation. It kind of evolved from a hobby into retirees' commercial operation. So we do fruit production. I've got about 100 trees planted, and some of them are up to 15 years old. So we get pretty good fruit production. And we also sell grafted trees and some scion wood.
I'm Blake Cothron, and I own and operate Peaceful Heritage Nursery, which is in Stanford, Kentucky. It's about less than an hour from here. And we specialize in resilient fruits, such as pawpaw, mulberries, cold hardy figs, things that grow with low maintenance, and for people that are wanting to grow things organically. In our nursery, we were formerly certified organic, and we're not certified anymore, but we still grow everything organically under the same standards. So we're trying to understand and develop ways to operate a commercial nursery sustainably and organically without any synthetic chemicals. And the nursery's mail order, so we ship all over the country. We do pawpaw trees, seed, scions, as well as all the other species that we grow.
Hi everyone, my name is James Briggs. I'm a pawpaw grower and propagator here in Bourbon County, Kentucky, not too far away. And my nursery is called Green Mammoth. And they've been very generous to let me participate in this, and I kept trying to think of what's something valuable that I could share with all of you. And this year, through Kentucky State University, we were able to connect with the Kentucky Nut Growers Association, the KNGA. And that's something that has been a tremendous resource. Both the other growers from Kentucky that are up here right now, they've also been active members of the KNGA. And if you're looking to learn more about grafting and plant propagation and growing native Kentucky fruit and nut trees, I can't encourage you enough to look into the Kentucky Nut Growers Association. There's an incredible amount of material and knowledge and people with experience that are there that can help us. And our next meeting is this October on the 25th, and it's at the Caldwell Extension Office in Princeton, Kentucky. And usually the meetings start at 9 a.m. So if any of that sounds interesting, we'd love to see you there, and hope to talk to you soon.
And I'll add real quick, the membership for the nut growers is just like $5 a year, so it's a very affordable membership if you want to join.
I'm Clifford England, and basically, we grow trees. Different trees, lots of trees, trees of all kinds. We use the word exotic, and they are in another land because we ship internationally and all over the world. Just about any plant material that you can think of. All right? Name of the company? England's Orchard and Nursery.
Hi, my name is Bill Nash. My son and I, John, and he's here today, operate a nursery farm up in Michigan, south center of Michigan around Lansing. It's a family farm. It's been in the family since 1860. We grow a great deal of diverse material there at the nursery. A lot of landscape material, and we wholesale a lot out to landscapers. We also have retail there, greenhouses, and grow pawpaws, of course. Started growing, probably planted my first pawpaw back about 40 years ago. Corwin Davis. Some of you may know that name. I knew him very well, and for whatever reason, he took a liking to me and became my mentor for a number of years. So we grow a lot of seedling pawpaws that we use for rootstock and also graft, all containerized in greenhouses, and we'll start in generally January, February, under lights, heating mats, and be able to control everything.
Okay, so we had, at our last roundtable, we had several people mention ambrosia beetle, and several of us referred back to Cliff. So why don't we have Cliff talk a little bit about what he does for his ambrosia beetle first. Could you talk a little bit about your ambrosia beetle, Cliff?
The ambrosia beetle is probably the number one problem other than the Seminole webworm. Ambrosia beetle, basically, as someone said before, keys in on the ethylene gas that trees release when they're stressed, and it can be drought, frozen, frosted, and sun-baked. But anything that releases that ethylene gas, ambrosia beetles draws in on it. What we do, and I've discovered, if you mask the scent, and we use neem oil, but a specific type of neem oil that is emulsified. It's cold pressed and then emulsified, and we spray it 150 gallon at a time. No, just water. We use 1.5 gallons per 150 gallon, and we spray it starting in March. Spray it up to about the 1st of May, every 2 weeks. Also with the neem oil, we use Telstar, which is a paramethrin, and what it does is catches the ambrosia beetles on the fly. So it's a two-stage. You're protecting the trees, and you're also killing the abundance of ambrosia beetles that's out there. Telstar, yes, sir. And it is labeled for pawpaws.
Okay, at this time, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and we've got a couple people with microphones to run microphones to you.
You talked about the neem?
Yes.
The neem? I have neem trees in my yard, and I use the neem for all my plants. I take the leaves and I boil them up, and I just take the water and I spray it on everything. And I'll tell you, it kills white flies and all these other stuff, and your beetles and stuff. We got a couple beetles that are taking care of our avocados. We found out spraying the neem water on them keeps that bug away.
That's a great idea.
So that's a great thing for anybody that may. Neem oil is one of the wonderfulest things there is, but I happen to have the plant that makes it even easier.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what your preferred potting mediums are for all of you.
Preferred potting medium?
Yeah.
I'll go with what's called Falford 52 or Sun and Grow. Let me think of the number. 803. Sun and Grow 803 is basically just 30% ground up decomposed bark. I like a little lighter bark mixture than the heavy peat.
I think Kentucky State University has a really good mix that they recommend, and that's 70% peat moss. Oh yeah, sorry about that. KSU recommends 70% peat moss, 20% vermiculite, and 10% perlite. I think those are great suggestions. That's an excellent mix. You know, peat moss is a lot slower to decompose and rot, And I think that there's times pawpaws can be sensitive to that. And especially when you're planting that mix into your native soil, it's going to blend a lot more beautifully. We've also been incorporating sand into our mix with the perlite, and that's had good results. And so yeah, that's what I would personally recommend is, go with KSU's recommendations, and if you want to experiment, you can try adding sand.
So in our nursery, I just use just straight Pro Mix. So it's peat moss with perlite already added. And I try to use the kind that has the mycorrhizal in it. And there's a mycorrhizal that is specifically there to destroy fungus gnats, which can be beneficial. And we usually add about 10 or 20% vermiculite to it for water holding capacity.
I use Pro Mix mixed with homegrown compost primarily.
We go with a product called BK55. It's just a bark 55%. They also have a BK25. I like the heavier mix so the pots don't fall over because we use the deep pots. The lighter mix is great for herbs and stuff like that on smaller pots, but too light for the bigger trees.
We use, it's a bit like Pro Mix. We have a local peat company that manufactures their own mix, 2.5 yard little mini bulk bags. So for the smaller pots, 2 or 3 gallons or smaller, and then the larger pots, we'll use a mix we make up sometimes with a northern pine hardwood bark and some peat. A little sand. So it just depends upon the size. Once you start getting into the 15, 20, 25 gallon pots, some of the expensive Pro Mix gets very expensive when you start filling that size pot.
We use ProMix BX is what we use here for potting our stuff. So it's just a standard ProMix BX is what we use. We got a question over there.
Is there any way to manage a tree specifically for scion collection, like any type of pruning technique? Like all I want to do is get scion from that wood or from that tree. Is there any? Are you all doing anything like that, or just cutting trees as you feel fit?
Yeah, if you want sign wood, push the tree very hard with nitrogen and force a lot of new growth.
So you just fertilize it.
Yes, particularly with nitrogen.
Okay.
Same here. We try to take, somebody said 1/3 growth. We try to top the trees about every third year to just produce sign wood. Yeah.
I think some of our trees we've probably hit a little too hard for scionwood collection, and it's so tempting when you're wanting to propagate and get the material out there, to heavily prune them. And I think keeping an eye on the trees and giving them a rest, some years that could be good. But of course, fertilization, that's going to be key for a lot of your new growth.
Yeah, so the scion wood is always 1-year-old growth, so just whatever you can do to stimulate that, which is usually just really hard pruning.
Yeah, you got the same, that's the answer, heavy cutting. But I would like to ask maybe the panel or other people in the audience, what do you think that heavy cutting of scion wood can also stimulate or create an environment for the ambrosia beetle to be attracted?
Wait, you got any answer to that? I don't. Yeah, but it can stress them out. Yeah, you can cut too much.
I know I lost a young tree or two last year.
Yeah.
Then I had cut too heavy from. Right.
Yeah, I've got to manage the stress of the trees. We don't want to invite. The ambrosia beetle always seems to kind of be an indication of other problems. If they show up, it means something else is wrong. And so really trying to find the root of the issue rather than thinking of the beetles as the enemy. It's, you're asking, well, what else is really happening here that's drawing the beetles in? And
Good point.
so, yeah, that could be a lot of things. It could be wet feed, it could be over pruning, poor conditions, like Mr. England said, freezing or late frost, and and drought. So trying to think of all those conditions and what we can do to kind of help the trees get through that stress without attracting the beetles.
What fertilizers do y'all use in your nursery production, and how often are you applying them?
We use a mixture of triple 10 and urea. And the way we apply it is 1 pound of fertilizer per 1 inch of growth. If it's 1 inch wide, 1 pound, 2 inches wide. Right. These trees are for the orchard trees, though. It's much different in the nursery. Yeah.
We'll use a custom blend. It's a 2177. It's an ammonium sulfate-based nitrogen rather than urea for a little more sulfur, particularly for the acid-loving plants like pawpaws, and we'll have them blend in micronutrients into that.
We're using the nature-safe fertilizer, and I can't off the top of my head remember what those numbers are. And we'll usually do a pound per tree per month for about 4 months, starting in March, and then we'll also use fish emulsion. We'll spray the leaves, and we'll mix a kelp extract with that, and that's worked well for us so far.
So over the years, I've seen phenomenal results using organic fertilizers in our nursery. So we're seeing pretty uniform growth on our seedlings that we grow organically, and we can get them 3-4 feet tall in about 18 months or less from seed. So granulated chicken manure works great. It's high nitrogen, fuels really strong growth. We also use kelp for micronutrients. And we have a whole liquid feed regimen we use. And so through that method, we've just seen amazing results. I don't see why there'd be any reason to use synthetic fertilizer to grow pawpaw trees at all. Even to get uniform results in the nursery is not difficult organically. I think a lot of times organic growers just tend to, especially when they're starting out, they tend to under-fertilize things. So you want to base it off of the shoot growth, the leaf size, and if you're not seeing the results that you like, you can up the fertilizer either if you still have time to do it that year, or you can do it next year. But we see phenomenal results just using organic fertilizers.
I used to try to use mostly just manure, and I don't think it will, especially if you're using horse manure, you're not getting enough of everything. So last couple of years I've been using Sustain organic fertilizer, and it certainly has improved fruit quality and tree quality that we've gotten in the last couple of years.
For container production, we use a triple 14. It's a 4-month time release, and then about every 2 weeks we put it on a liquid like foliar feed with kelp or anything like that for container production.
I was wondering, how many trees do you think are sold in the U.S. every year? How many grafted pawpaw trees are sold in the U.S. globally?
What was the question again?
How many grafted pawpaw trees do you think are sold in the U.S.? Or I guess you could answer, how many trees about a year does your nursery sell? Would be another thing.
For me, 500 grafts a year.
About 250.
Between 500 to 800.
Probably a couple hundred trees a year.
500 to 700.
Well, probably around 1,500.
Any other questions?
In the past, there was a lot of people talking about issues with pawpaws when transplanting and getting them established. and it was considered that you needed to go get soil from native pawpaws for the mycorrhiza that associates with them. And nobody seems to talk anything about that now in pawpaw pot production and propagation. Is anybody making any calculated effort to get that mycorrhiza available for the plant? And then the other thing is the depth of the pots for the seedlings, and is anybody doing air pruning to eliminate that taproot and make the tree start producing and get generative much quicker?
So Tim Lane earlier, he mentioned the symbiotic relationship that some of the other Annonaceae trees have with mycorrhizal fungi. And I think that that's definitely something interesting to look into. Neil Peterson, I saw him talk about glomus, and that was something that they had found to be an important connection with these trees. And so I think that there's ways that we can go out and look to harvest those indigenous microorganisms like glomus, and you can propagate those separately from the trees. Glomus needs some kind of root system to connect to, so you could use corn or sorghum, things like that. And then once those roots are inoculated, you can combine that with your potting mix for your potted trees to kind of prepare them for planting in the field. And that's just one version of a big system with a lot of possibilities. I definitely think that that's worth looking into, and I think that is something that's important for those trees and could help them to be stronger.
What was the second part of your question?
The second part of your question was how tall are the pots that we're using?
Yeah, the depth of the pots, because when the seed initially starts sending roots down, apparently, they'll put them down like 9 inches. Pecans will do the same thing, very, very long tap roots, and it's a survival thing. And pecans don't put very much growth up the first year at all in comparison to their root depth. Pawpaws are not quite that way. But if you air prune those a couple of times, I know somebody that can, in about 4 years, 3 years time, he sells trees in 7-gallon pots that are already reproductive. And that air pruning of the initial taproot and getting fibrous side roots seems to stimulate reproduction way much faster in the tree.
We air prune our trees. So our trees are air pruned. And the final size that we ship them out in are about 9-inch pots. So air pruning is just allowing the roots that would normally extend through the bottom of the pot, you allow those to come into contact with air. So if you had, say, a landscape fabric here and your pots were on the ground, they're not going to get air pruned. They're going to grow, they're going to extend outside of the pot and kind of circle around the pot or try to grow through the plastic, which is very problematic. So if you have them on some sort of greenhouse table, they're going to hit that open air eventually, and that basically kills off the tip of the root and then allows feeder roots to expand and grow inside, higher up. If you look at our pots, they've got large openings on the bottom, so they probably are designed for air pruning. I never had the thought that maybe they were designed for that, but that seems likely. So,
I guess I'll add. So I'll add, what we use here are 4-inch by 14-inch tall tree pots. They're made by Stewie and Son, and they've got kind of slots on the bottom, like pretty big openings in the bottom, and that's for air pruning. But that's what they're called tall 1, but they're 4-inch by 14-inch tall. And by the end of the first year, the pawpaws will be down to the bottom of those pots. They'll send out about that much taproot before they ever try to break the soil surface. So.
Yeah, we use the air pruning method also. We'll start the seed in trays that have a mesh bottom. So when the seed goes down through that mesh, it's air pruned. And at that point in time, we also inoculate all the trays with a commercial mycorrhizae mix. And then we transplant those into Anderson X pots. They're square pots. They're ones we use are 6 inches tall and about 4 inches wide, and they have an X at the bottom, so the bottom is very open. And so that initial little seedling taken out of the tray, which was air pruned, now goes into a pot, which is air pruned for a while. We'll graft those many times the following year, and or transplant those into a larger pot and grow them on. And once they've been through those 2 stages of air pruning, then they form a very nice fibrous root and have a lot more vigor, and grass do a lot better also.
Anybody else? Okay. Back there in the back.
Could y'all touch on whether you use shade cloth in your seedling production, and if so, what percentages you're using?
Wonder what shade, if you're using shade cloth for your seedling production, and if so, what percentage of shade cloth you're using?
In our nursery, we use shade paint. I phased out shade cloth years ago, and I've been really happy with greenhouse shade paint. And it's like around 50% or so. You can change the density of it by how thick you paint onto the high tunnel or greenhouse.
We use shade cloth by about, it's either 35 or 40%, and it works real well.
And yeah, we'll use about a 50% shade cloth. And in Michigan, we're about ready to take it off.
We've got about, I think, 45% shade cloth hung in the top of our houses, but it doesn't go down the side. And so, yeah, when they're small like that, they need to have some shade. So I think we have a question over here.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up on the fertilizer. I've always been told and have done March, April, May fertilizing. Would not it be beneficial to also to do something after the trees have gone dormant, lost their leaves, gone dormant, maybe November? Would there be a benefit to fertilizing then also?
What's that again?
The question was, would there be a benefit fertilizing the trees later, like when they're dormant in November?
Go ahead.
Well, sometimes you can apply a phosphorus and potash, or your nitrogen. If you start applying that in the fall, a lot of that just gets leached out during the winter. So yeah, particularly with the potash, a lot of times that's applied in the fall.
We actually stopped fertilizing nursery-grown trees the 15th of August, primarily because the trees won't harden off in time if you do not. We withdraw nitrogen.
Yeah, I do the same as Cliff. You want to let them harden off, so that may cause some premature yellowing. Like you see our pawpaw trees on our table out there already starting to yellow, but that's intentional so that they can leach out that fertilizer, and then they can harden off, and they're not stimulated to put on lots of green growth that's not going to harden off and then end up getting burned off.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question about shipping trees, particularly grafted trees. If any of you all do that, and what strategies you found that really help with that, if that's either shipping at different times of the year or if it's from the propagation side, what might help with shipping live trees?
I think Blake's probably a good person to answer questions about shipping trees.
That'll be $100 for that answer. Wow, I mean, there's a lot that can be said there. I wouldn't recommend using the United States Postal Service. There's a lot of variables there on like how far you'd be shipping, what size containers you're using. Basically, there's just a lot of trial and error involved, and you just have to make sure that things are packaged up securely so they don't get to the customer destroyed, which is quite challenging to do. I'd recommend using like FedEx or UPS on that.
I stopped shipping a few years ago. I have only pick up at the house, happen to be between New York and Philadelphia. I've got a lot of customers, so I don't have to ship.
The same as Charles here. We gave up shipping. We're allowed to ship in New York State to other folks in New York State, but once you get out of state, the rules and regulations of where you're shipping to, there's wordage that has to go along with some. There's some states like California and Alaska that don't want stuff coming in from New York especially. You know, you got grub that could be shipped, spotted wing, spotted lanternfly, I'm sorry. There's just so much, and it was so hard to keep track of what every state needed, and then your inspector has to come out for each individual group going out, and else you can mass, if you're shipping enough, you can get a batch all at one time. There was just so many regulations that we just stopped. It just wasn't worth it for us.
We don't ship trees, but we do ship scion wood, and that's been pretty simple. Keep regulations in mind, and then outside of that, we use the USPS flat rate padded envelope, and we'll usually reinforce it on the inside with cardboard, and you can get a significant amount of scion wood in one of those.
Yeah, in 2022, we stopped shipping trees. I'm sure we still do the seed, scion wood, and we do ship internationally. It's a long story about why we stopped shipping trees, but it was for health reasons.
We'll ship trees. And I have to say, my son's come up. He's the shipping department with very good boxing, and certainly you're growing containers for shipping, particular sizes, and of course, if you're shipping across country and what, we have to comply with the United States Department of Agriculture's Japanese beetle harmonization program. So you have to jump through a number of hoops to do that.
Okay, I'm going to jump back to the pot question. I want to ask about the Anderson X pots. I am using 10-inch tree pots to start. What I have found is because of the open bottom, which you mentioned on the X pots, that the soil tends to leave, not just the minerals, but the soil goes away. So I'm getting air pruned really much. And it's kind of a pain because you have to keep track of how much soil's in the pot all the time. So looking for a better solution or what to do about keeping the soil in the pots when you're using open bottom pots.
A couple different things. Sometimes before you transplant into those pots, you set the pot on a fairly hard surface and push the soil down in there so the bottom stays. Or sometimes you can use pieces of paper towel.
Okay, here a question for you guys shipping out over 100 trees in spring or a couple thousand. And do you ever keep record? What's the casualty? How many requests refund or reported the trees dead? And in my experience, and most of depend on the customer. They didn't take care of their part of the work. I can't do anything. They don't water them or they all want bigger tree. That means the risk of dying is much higher. Okay, here we go. I need to know your percentage. At some time, I'm like 100% dead, my customer reported. I said, come back to get more, but you have to follow my instruction.
I'll only answer if I get Oriana's orange scion wood. For our nursery, it's very low, probably less than 1%. Yeah.
I couldn't hear the question.
She was wondering the percentage of trees that we ship out, how many if they're broken or dead.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. But if a customer has an issue, we take it very seriously, so we deal with it, and usually that involves a free replacement to the customer. Certainly if it's their dead, but if it gets their broken, they get a free replacement. But all the different shipping companies claim that they that you're insured for your shipment automatically, but then they're very reluctant to actually send you a check for that.
Oh, the percent that you have to replace, you have a tendency to always remember those customers over the other ones, of course. The percent is fairly small. Once in a while, we will get a damaged box in shipment, but UPS has been quite good about paying for that.
I know somebody said that they added mycorrhizal additives, and I used azomite, and it has a lot of different micronutrients and the mycorrhizal stuff, and I was just wondering if anybody else used azomite.
Yeah, I hate to name this person, but his name is Woody Walker, and he really turned me on to the azomite. And I can't tell you why, other than it's loaded with minerals that it does something, and it does up the soil.
We like using azomite in our potting mix.
I haven't found it necessary to add any minerals to our mix.
Okay.
To clarify, beyond to add what's beyond already in the fertilizers that we use, we haven't found it necessary to supplement. Yeah. Yeah, the Pro Mix that we use has mycorrhizal fungi added.
Any more questions? We still got like 20 minutes left, so we got plenty of time for questions. Anybody has any? Hey.
Do you all raise?
Go ahead.
Do you all raise your own seedlings for grafting onto, or do you have a source for?
Thank you. Both. Yeah. Some we purchase, some we grow ourselves. Yeah.
We grow all our own seedlings from our own orchard, which are all grafted pawpaws. So pretty decent seedlings. And once we grow those too, we'll go through that tray that we initially start them. And of course, like the bell-shaped curve, there's some inferior individuals. So we'll probably discard at least 40% of them out of that, and just take the most vigorous and healthy looking ones, so you have a little better chance of survival and of success and of course of grafting.
We use a mix. However, we've been happier with the trees that we've grown from seed. It just seems like you know the source of the seed, and you're able to produce something and really control it from the beginning, and when it's time to graft, that's usually a healthier product.
So we start 100% of our own seeds that we grow in the nursery, and we've just seen a huge difference from doing that. And I'm not speaking about any of the nurseries that are represented up here, but I bought pawpaws from a lot of nurseries over the years, and I just tend to have seen really poor root systems, and that's been pretty standard in what I've seen. And years ago we purchased pawpaw trees with the idea of grafting them, and the quality of them was just so poor that we received. They were just beat up. The root systems are really poor. Everything was wrong. And we tried other things over the years, and we just settled on just growing all of our own. So we grow out thousands of seedlings a year, and like Mr. Nash was saying, we thin out the ones that are the weaklings or that show any sign of phylosticta. We toss those and graft on the best ones and the biggest ones. And we do that about in the second year of growth, or they're after the second year of growth. So when they're 2 years old, we'd graft on that following spring.
Yes, I grow all my own seedlings. I tried a few years ago, maybe 6 or 8 years ago. I bought seedlings from another person a grower in New Jersey, and they were just not as good a quality as I could grow my own. So we just use our own seeds from the orchard.
We do a little mix of both on there. So we grow our own seedlings. Sometimes there's just not enough ready that we get from 3 other sources also. So it's a hodgepodge of whatever looks the nicest to graft onto, and the other ones wait a year to get grafted. And then, like this gentleman said, we throw away some of the really weak seedlings, just are tossed out.
Can you talk at all about graft heights and graft height preferences? And then for those of you that grow, can you talk about planting depth and rootstock exposure? Grafting height and then eventually rootstock exposure on the orchard tree itself.
So I'll just go with the grafting in the containers because I graft when they're actually starting to leaf out. Jerry Lehman always taught me when he was my mentor about the size of a mouse ear when the leaf's about that size. So timing wise, that's just what I use. And I usually graft, I don't know why I learned 2 fists up. I go 2 fists high and then graft onto the rootstock at that point. I use a real simple cleft graft. I don't have any hot callus pipe or anything yet. One of these days, maybe. I use a budding band and some parafilm to make sure that it doesn't dry out. So pretty simplistic for what I do. I might have more losses than if I had the hot pipe callus system or something like that, but it works for me right now there.
I'm sorry, what was the question again? About graft height? I try to graft at a height that matches the sign wood I want to use, but as a general rule, I would say it's about a foot up from soil. Again, whip and tongue is primarily basically the only thing I use. And use buddy tape and wax, and that's it. I get pretty good percent after a lot of years of practice.
The height varies just depending on the scion wood, the diameter of the scion wood, the diameter of the rootstock. So our rootstocks are pretty stocky, so it's usually a little bit higher up. And we haven't found any issue with that whatsoever. So.
The container trees, we're doing a whip and tongue graft, and we're trying to match that scion wood to the rootstock as much as possible. If we're grafting trees in the field for scion production, sometimes we'll graft further up, off the ground on the tree, and in that case, we'll still use a whip and tongue, but we'll modify it so that it's kind of on the side of that bark, and it's after a couple years, it really just melts together, and it's amazing how those trees heal, and how you just wouldn't even realize that a side bark or bark graft on the side had been done after a while.
I concur with the other growers.
Yes. So we do the same procedures there, and sometimes the whip and tongue evolves into more of just a whip because it's such small sign and trees. And we start in generally about February because we'll force everything in the greenhouse, and also with the seeds start that very early, and then we'll use lights on those too, LED lights. We found because pawpaws of course are sensitive to time of light, photosensitive, and they realize that if they start emerging in the middle of the winter and that daylight is very short, they want to shut down and you're not going to start them back up. So we'll use LED lights and of course keep the humidity and the temperature up there and keep that all controlled for a pretty good success rate.
Back to the ambrosia beetle. So you said they go after stressed trees. My question is, if you have a stressed tree that gets an ambrosia beetle and I have an entire nursery, just by opportunity, are they going to go after everything else or only go after that one stressed tree?
Ambrosia beetles are opportunistic. And if you've got stressed trees, they will go after their stressed trees. The key is that it has to be releasing the ethylene gas. That's what draws the ambrosia beetle in. And like I said, with the neem oil, it's a deterrent. It's actually a preventive. You want to keep the ambrosia beetles from finding that tree. That's the reason you use neem.
We've had trees get hit and none of the other trees around it be affected, you know. So if we do see signs of ambrosia beetle, we cut it down, we burn it, and then, you know, those trees will send up really nice root suckers. And so I think that's part of the important thing, you know. Anyone who's interested in growing fruit trees or growing pawpaws should also be interested in learning how to graft. You know, I think that's an important part of the culture and keeping things protected and keeping things going. The more of you that understand how to do that and learn how to do that, you know, all of a sudden you can have backups of your trees. If something does get hit by beetles, it's not the end of the world. You know, it's just gonna have to be a restart. And, you know, if you're not already doing that, I definitely want to encourage you to think about learning how to graft. And again, the Kentucky Nut Growers Association is a great place to learn. There's a lot of people there that would be happy to help you. So, yeah, if you're not already doing that, I really like to encourage it.
We haven't seen ambrosia beetles on our farm since 2020 when we had a severe late frost or late freeze. Like Jeremy was saying, it was in the 80s, and then it went down to 20 degrees the first week of May. And there'd already been a late frost that had harmed everything, and then everything was just starting to recover, and then we had this double freeze, and we had some ambrosia beetles that came and killed probably 10 or 20 trees out of the orchard, but I haven't seen them since.
I seem to get a couple of trees every year with ambrosia beetle. And there again, I've got woodland basically around most where the trees are. And I think, again, it's stress. If you over prune too much, you can have that problem. And it's stress is the problem. And you get the ethylene being produced, and I'm repeating myself or repeating other people's information.
And it could be beneficial to paint large pruning cuts with some sort of pruning sealer or something like that also. So that's something that we do in our orchard, and that might be beneficial to block any ethylene gas from coming out of that wound.
Thank you, gentlemen. I want to first say, before I ask questions, thank you for all your wisdom, and collectively there's a lot of years of wisdom here, so we really appreciate it. Question for you is along the lines of how, as nursery, from a nursery perspective particularly, tobacco mosaic virus, this is going to probably enter into the equation before long, and is there any particular way that is anyone screening for this yet, or looking at scion wood as you're bringing it in that potentially could be infected with tobacco mosaic and then spread it that way? So just see what your thoughts are, or if you're doing anything yet.
Yeah, Neil Peterson actually made me aware of tobacco mosaic virus, and for any of you that haven't seen it, it severely deforms the foliage to the point of being indistinguishable. And I think that there's quite the danger in diseases being transmitted through infected scion wood, especially with how the popularity of pawpaws has exploded. I think there's definitely some risk there. So I would be careful about sourcing seed from just any random person on Facebook or wherever, especially if you were to do this commercially. And having excellent hygiene, just cleaning pruning tools, cleaning grafting knives in between each batch of scion wood's a great idea. And if anything that sprouts out post-grafting looks deformed or infected or anything, just destroy it. And whenever we do our seedlings every year, I see about 1 or 2 variegated ones, and those are of course a genetic mutation, and that's probably not good to propagate those either, for the very same reason that we don't know if some of those could be virus infected and then it gets transmitted to something else. So I think viruses are an important issue in agriculture with any sort of crop, and I don't think pawpaws are excluded from that.
Okay, so this question, I'm right here, is about irrigation. So I'm a kind of one-woman operation with a muscle man. It's just a hobby right now. I already planned down jujubes, but I want to get into pawpaw. So I want to ask you about irrigation, because I know pawpaw going to need water, but I'm in Texas. So can you share kind of your irrigation setup system, and then potentially, you know, just maybe very low-key, not too expensive ideas that you can throw around to people who kind of want to start doing this on their own?
Chi, what is your water source?
It's a well.
You do have a well?
I do have a well that pumped to a tiny home.
Okay. See, we don't. And I'll be first to admit, last month's water bill was over $1,000. And we have 2 meters. One for the nursery and one for the farm. The farm was the one that's over $1,000. And you can use, we use drip emitters on orchard tubing. We use 1 gallon per hour. On the end trees, we typically put 2 emitters, so that'd be 2 gallon per hour. But did you get a chance to look at our layout?
I saw the drip. I didn't see the beginning of how you set it up.
If you go back there, take and drive around and look at it. What it is, I've just brought from a water meter, I have 2 hydrants, and those 2 hydrants run out to orchard tape through a garden hose out to orchard tubing, and then the irrigation runs in the orchard. That is a critical part of it, because we didn't have any rain from June the 28th till 5 days ago. I mean, the grass was brown, the earth was black, and cracked open, so it is crucial. And I understand where you're coming from, especially in Texas with the high heat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't use any irrigation in our orchard, and I think that's not going to work everywhere. Definitely not in Texas, but Kentucky, you know, we have heavy clay soils. Our water table on our farm is quite high, and also all the trees that are in our orchard are grown and propagated in our own nursery, so they all have really good root systems, and I think that helps also. There have been times where we've had droughts, and I wished I had irrigation set up, and we had to do some hand watering, but it wasn't a big deal, and everything survived. But I think that if you're planning on doing a commercial orchard, anything over an acre, then you need to have drip irrigation set up. And municipal water, like Cliff said, can get quite expensive.
You know, we don't irrigate our field trees. If it is a drought, we'll get out and hand water stuff. You know, one low-tech way of doing things is you could get a 5-gallon bucket and drill a hole in the bottom and fill it up with water, and that's going to kind of slowly drip that water out so the soil absorbs it better. You know, again, it's so different in Texas with the climate you're working with. You know, you might have to get creative and figure something out for that. But, you know, these trees do like water, and as long as that soil is able to breathe, they can take a lot of water. And so, anyone else have advice?
And the last thing I'll say is soils that are higher in organic matter are going to hold moisture better. So any sort of cover cropping that gets like ryegrass roots or anything in the soil is going to hold moisture like a sponge.
We knew we needed the water the first year they were in, and we didn't have an irrigation system. So on the cheap, I had a 2-wheel cart. I raised up a 250-gallon tote up on that cart, and then basically there's a conversion kit for the tote to get it to a hose spigot. So I can drive the tractor with, it's basically just a handle from an old broom taped to the hose, And when you raise it up, it stops, and when you put it down at the tree, it flows out. Really just cheap on the cheap, and basically it worked for the first year. Just the time to drive the wagon around, but a two-wheel cart turns pretty easy in the rows versus a four-wheel wagon, and we did that on the cheap, and it worked at least to get the trees through the first year.
Yeah, I have irrigation in the nursery area, but nothing in the fields. If we have a really severe drought, it's manual or nothing else.
Well, the good news is that there's a tremendous amount of information out there on irrigation and a lot of products out there on irrigation, and many things can make life a little bit easier. We run different zones, probably around 30 different zones on 4 different timing clocks. And these timing clocks now have gone down way in price what they used to be. And they're Wi-Fi, and you can control them from your phone, which is very nice. Many times, if I wake up in the middle of the night and a surprise thunderstorm comes along, I can grab my phone and put everything on rain delay right there. So there's just a lot of information, a lot of different types of irrigation. And of course, we have Israel to thank for that, because a lot of that technology came out of they have to raise food in a desert. So there's some very efficient irrigation methods anymore.
We're going to do a orchard tour tomorrow, and we're happy to show you our irrigation, but it's similar to Cliff's, where it's trickle emitters and it's 2 1-gallon emitter per tree. But during the orchard tour tomorrow, we're happy to show that to you. So, all right, last question, I think.
Do any of you have experience with chip budding, and what's the timing on the chip budding? What time of year do you do that?
Okay, we do very little chip budding. It's almost all containerized in the spring, and whip and tongue, sometimes cleft, depending on that. I think, Cliff, you do more.
Not really. We do mostly the signwood grafting. On some of the rarer things, we do chip budding, but typically it's did in May.
Dr. Pomper put out information last year about all these different types of grafts and what seemed to work best for the pawpaw, and the whip and tongue had the highest rate of success out of any of those grafts. And even though chip budding did work, the whip and tongue, with all that cambium contact, it had a higher rate of success. So that's what I would recommend.
Chip budding, you would kind of do it similar to when you graft pawpaw in general, which is when it's actively growing. So, typically that's May. You don't want to do it when it gets really hot. So really, like early May is about the best time to do that. So, all right, everyone, give our panel here a round of applause and thank them.